is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to do a comparison of two sort of 7-inch class tablets. Basically, we have the 8-inch iPad mini, because it's 7.9 inches, and the Google Nexus 7, a 7-inch tablet. One runs Android, one runs iOS. Beyond that, what's the difference? We're going to look at them now. So here we have it. Two, well, sort of 7-inch tablets. Like I said, 7.9-inch display on the iPad mini. Let's call it 8 inches. That's really what sets it apart from other 7-inch tablets. Well, it's a little bit bigger, so you don't quite feel like you're living small. And the 7-inch Nexus 7. The best thing about the Nexus 7 is the price, $199. And you don't get junk for the price. You get some pretty good internal components. 1.2 gigahertz quad-core Tegra 3 CPU in here with GeForce graphics. That's good stuff there. And then the iPad mini, it's pretty much an iPad 2 inside. You're looking at a dual-core 1 gigahertz Apple A5 CPU with, granted, Apple's excellent graphics on there, so it actually does benchmark faster in GL benchmark graphics tests. Though on the cross-platform Geekbench test that looks at overall performance, the Nexus scores 1421 versus 752 for the iPad mini. So clearly more raw horsepower inside the Nexus 7. For the base model on each of these, now you're looking at 16 gigs of storage. The 8 gig model for the Nexus 7 is gone now. And Nexus 7 starts at $199 for the 16 gig versus $329 for the iPad mini. So you're going to be spending more money, obviously, on the iPad mini. And they're both also available with 32 gigs of storage. That costs you $249 with the Nexus 7. And for the iPad mini, if you want to go up on another storage increment to 32 gigs, that's another $100. So you're looking at $429 versus $249 here for the 32 gig Nexus 7. Obviously, on price, instantly, the Nexus 7 is the winner. What if you want to have built-in wide area networking? That means 3G or 4G. With the Nexus 7, you can get 3G, HSPA+, but no 4G LTE. And the HSPA Plus that's in the Nexus is unlocked, but it's the bands for the US folks here, it's AT&T pretty much that you're going to want to use for that. Here with the iPad mini you get LTE, and there are different flavors. There's a Sprint one, a Verizon one, and an AT&T one. Of course it's going to cost you more money again. It's a $130 surcharge if you want to have the LTE built in. So that brings the price up to $459 for the 16 gig iPad mini with Wi-Fi and LTE 4G. However, you do get the versatility of being able to choose from 3 carriers versus one that's only pretty much AT&T compatible and is 3G but not 4G. Both have front HD video cameras that do a good job. A little bit better on the iPad mini with its nice FaceTime camera with the backside illuminated sensor and face detection. Pretty decent camera on the Nexus 7. As we turn around on the back, we will see there is no camera on the back of the Nexus 7. There is no rear camera. For $199, that's forgivable. Look at the Amazon Kindle Fire HD. Likewise, you don't get a rear camera for that price. With the iPad mini right up here, you can see we have a little camera lens that has a 5 megapixel camera, backside illuminated sensor. It can shoot 1080p video. Pretty decent camera, pretty comparable to the iPhone 4. So not bad, and given the fact that this is a smaller tablet, not as big as the full-size iPad or a 10-inch Nexus 10 tablet, for example, you don't feel so funny waving this around shooting videos using the rear camera. For those of you who are wondering, why does the iPad mini cost so much more? Well, besides the fact there's the usual Apple tax, Apple products are not cheap. There's some more expensive design elements going on. This has a metal anodized aluminum bag, gorgeous looking, ultra thin, very light. This is 0.68 pounds. So it's basically premium material all around. Nice chamfered edges over here. Everything that you look at here just says, I'm a quality piece. So for those of you who really care about the look and quality of your consumer electronics devices, the iPad has an edge there. Also on the bottom here we have stereo speakers. Finally, for a change, Apple's putting stereo speakers in, and these speakers sound really good, nice volume. Nexus 7 has a single speaker on the back, not sounding so great. And there's our speaker grill right here for the Nexus 7. Just a little slit, and that's one of the things about it, it's a little bit on the quiet side. Of course, for headphones, sounds a lot better. Now, another important consideration is the size difference. Even though these are both so-called smaller tablets, you can see the Nexus 7 is considerably narrower because, well, it's an inch smaller in the display size. It's also a little bit shorter. And this makes a difference for those of you who have small hands. Holding this with one hand is not too difficult a task. I mean, I don't think you're going to want to sit there and do one-handed operation like you would with a cell phone, obviously, but if you want to hold it in one hand reading, it feels pretty natural. This guy is wider. You have to have pretty wide hands if you want to grab the iPad mini around. I do have pretty big hands. I can do it. But for those of you who have small hands, or if your children are going to be using it, they'll probably find something like the Nexus 7 easier to handle. The Nexus 7, by the way, weighs 3/4 of a pound, so it's actually a little bit heavier than the iPad mini. And in terms of thickness or thinness, you can see just how skinny the iPad mini is. Again, when you pay more money, you get things like ultra-thin designs, so that's one of the things you're getting for your extra money here. Wildly thin, incredibly light for given the size of it, the iPad mini. Now when it comes to overall build quality and materials, for $199, I'll just say it again, the Nexus 7 is not a bad device. You get pretty good attention to detail, not bad looking. We've got the metal wraparound sides over here. It's a good looking product, even if it doesn't have all the fancy anodized aluminum of the iPad. Back here we have a rubberized soft touch finish. You don't get metal, but it doesn't look cheap to me at all. It looks just fine. It feels nice in the hand. But for those of you who are into metal and all those quality things, again, you're probably going to like the iPad mini a bit more. On the Nexus 7, we've had no problems. Some people complain that their glass has not been well attached on the corners. Absolutely no problems with creaks or bends or flexing on either of these. No problems whatsoever. Here we have our mini USB, that's for syncing and for charging both, and our headphone jack is at the bottom here. And other than that, not much going on. Pretty simple design. Volume controls a power button, and that's what you're looking at here. Now, on the iPad mini, typical of Apple, we have our one center home button right here in the bottom. And here we have the new lightning connector, the stereo speakers that we talked about. And the same volume controls over here. We've got our multi-purpose locking switch here. You can use this to rotation lock or to mute volume. Up top we have our power button and our headphone jack. Both of these have accelerometers and therefore obviously support landscape and portrait orientation. And we've got ambient light sensors in here. Now the light sensor on the iPad works the way we wish every light sensor worked. You can set the automatic brightness on and then set, relatively speaking, using the slider, just how bright you want it to be. The darker end of auto bright or the brighter end of auto bright. Nexus is pretty much just auto bright, and since the OS 4.2 update, actually auto brightness has been a bit flaky for us, but I never really enjoyed it before. It was always a bit too dark for me anyway, so I've gone with manual brightness on the Nexus 7. They're both quite bright displays. They both have IPS panels. The Nexus 7 is a little bit smaller and higher resolution, so you get 216 ppi versus 163 on the iPad mini, so a little higher pixel density there, 1280 by 800, which is the resolution you see on a lot of 10-inch Android tablets. So text looks extremely sharp on this, very pleasant to use as an e-reader. The iPad mini, 1024 by 768 resolution. That's the same resolution as the iPad and the iPad 2, but scrunched down to 7.9 inches, so things look sharper than they do on the iPad 2. Despite the lower pixel density, I'm actually enjoying the iPad mini display more. Text still looks fine to me. If you're used to a Retina display, it's going to look a little bit fuzzy to you probably because you're used to the apex of potential sharpness, shall we say. But the colors are very nicely calibrated. Apple does a very good job calibrating their displays. With the Nexus 7, notoriously the calibration is not very good, and that leads to colors, especially bright colors, looking a little undersaturated or not quite so popping and stunning, where on the iPad mini, colors are very rich and very enjoyable. If you're looking at darker things or darker scenes in movies, then the Nexus 7 does just fine. It's just only those bright colors. It's doing a lot of compression with the light shades in photos and in videos. Now what does the extra almost inch get you on the iPad mini? As you can see, we've got our website loaded with both of these, and we have actually more text showing in landscape mode going up and down here versus the Nexus 7, even though the Nexus 7 is higher resolution. So yeah, 1024 by 768 and that 4:3 aspect ratio. Though not ideal for watching videos, since most of those are widescreen 16:9 or even wider. For viewing web pages, for looking at Word documents, and for reading ebooks, 4:3 aspect ratio is really quite nice here. The whites also get a bit whiter on the iPad mini, again because there's a lot of compression going on with light colors here on the Nexus 7. In terms of browsing speed, we have the default Safari browser on the iPad mini, and we have the Chrome browser installed on the Nexus 7. Neither of these does Adobe Flash. They both do HTML5 video. Both very capable browsers, both fast. A little bit faster there on the iPad mini for pinch zooming. Now I'm running Android OS 4.2, which is the latest available operating system, only available for Nexus devices right now. And I'll tell you, it has actually made my device a little bit slower. So for those of you who get a Nexus 7, you'll get that 4.2 update pushed to you. I'm sure Google's going to have an update soon to actually fix some of the slowness and some of the bugs they introduced in 4.2, which is very unlike Google. Usually every operating system move forward is a pretty good one. In this case, we've seen some strangeness, like I said, with the ambient light sensor, with a little bit of performance degradation, and sometimes with stuttering music playback in the background. But rest assured, those should be temporary things if you do pick up a Nexus 7. Or if you're actually worried about those things, if you get that upgrade pushed to you, just say no and wait. And with the month of December coming up, we know that Google's going to be fixing some of the bugs too. In 4.2, if you're making calendar appointments, for some reason you want to set up somebody's birthday or something like that, the month of December just disappeared. Yes, it did. So we're sure that there's going to be an update soon to bring that back, because December's coming real soon now. So how does HTML5 streaming video play? We have a video review of the Nokia Lumia 920 here, loaded on both of these on our website, and this is of course YouTube based, and we're going to see the HTML5 version. First we'll try it out with the iPad mini. You can see where we are, a little bit over halfway with the volume. This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're looking at the Nokia Lumia 920 on AT&T. This is the US version for AT&T. Plays nice, very sharp, nice colors. LTE, available in a lot of singing colors. Fairly good color gamut there. Good streaming, obviously over Wi-Fi on both of these, because this is the Wi-Fi version of each tablet we're looking at, and now we're going to try the same thing on the Nexus 7. And volume setting is about the same, much quieter. This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're looking at the Nokia Lumia 920 on AT&T. Playing just fine. And color's not quite as vibrant, not quite as bright, but still a very nice, sharp IPS display. And again, for $199, pretty nice display. Same is true actually of the Kindle Fire HD, which has the same resolution as 7 inches too, and also has an IPS display with very nice, bright colors too. Now, how about YouTube? Those of you who are in the know, you know that there is no YouTube app for iOS 6 tablets, only for the iPhone right now. Of course, we hope it's going to be coming for the tablets. So what you have to do is go to YouTube using your web browser, and you'll get the HTML5 version of the site. So that's what it looks like right there. And here we're looking at our channel in both places, by the way. You get an actual YouTube app, of course, on the Google product. And what I think is a nicer layout, more mobile optimized versus this kind of generic thing right here. Now in terms of the video playback quality, you're going to get the same thing on both of these. It doesn't really matter which one you go with. But a little bit more customization of the UI, a little bit more intent and nice design right here for the Google Nexus 7. Now how about ebook reading? We've got iBooks loaded on the iPad mini, and we have Google Books loaded on the Nexus 7. With both of these, you can put on Kindle, you can put on Nook, you can put on Sony Reader, so you have your choices there as to which reader you're going to use, and various non-bookstore affiliated readers for both platforms are available as well. But we're just using the built-in right now. It's perfectly fine application on each end. So you can see 4:3 aspect ratio, a little bit more book-like, kind of nice. This one happens to have a little bit bigger margin setup. It really depends on how the book is laid out, unless you want to start overriding these things. But text is a little bit sharper thanks to the higher pixel density on the Nexus 7. Now I enjoy reading on both of these equally, and I think a lot of people will say, wow, I like the 4:3 aspect ratio better, it feels more book-like. And then a whole lot of other people are going to say, but I like how narrow this is and how easy it is to hold with one hand if you want to wrap your hand around it while you're reading versus holding it on the edge. Obviously the bezels are smaller on the iPad mini on the side. In particular, you can see where you would probably want to grab it like a book. And Apple says with their 10-point of touch, they know how to actually reject finger touch if it's on the edge and it's not moving any. Now I find that's fine, except for I'm a little bit fidgety when I read, and if I keep moving my hand around, I do start to confuse it occasionally. Both of them are speedy enough for page turns. Really depends on what app you use. iBooks is a little bit more graphically pretty, but that really, again, is just up to the application you're using and how much that matters to you if you want pretty. Facing page views on both of these applications is available. So I'd say here it really depends on which you like better, the 4:3 aspect ratio or the more small and handleable size of the Nexus 7. Of course, the iPad mini does fight back with being a little bit lighter, so your hand won't get as tired when you're holding it up for an hour reading a book. Now how about speed and stability? In theory, the Nexus 7 should be a lot faster with that quad-core CPU running at 1.2 gigahertz versus the 1 gigahertz dual-core on the iPad mini. But the thing is we know Apple really optimizes iOS. They can do that because they make both the operating system and the hardware, so they can tune everything really tightly, a lot like Microsoft does with Windows Phone and Windows Surface tablet that they make. On the other hand, we have Android OS Jelly Bean here with Project Butter, which was Google's work to actually really speed up user interface and response times a lot. But you know what? I'll tell you this. 4.2 again is a little bit buggy, so don't take this as being truly indicative of what you're going to get. I'm sure this is going to speed up with an update, because 4.1, which the ship with, boy, that really rocked. It was really flying, felt nice and fast. You can just go through your screens zippity quick. And now I occasionally see some lag when I'm launching applications and things like that. iPad mini is always going to be wickedly fast. That's just the way Apple products are. They are fast. Scroll through everything over here. Launch applications, boom, we're done, we're back very fast. Back into iBooks, no problem. Run something that we haven't been running before, like the music player. Now this should take a little bit longer to load, and it will, because it's got some more content to work on here. How about we just try to do the same thing here. And now we switch between our different views to see how quick it is. Pretty darn quick. Little album view here. Bigger album view here, which I think is kind of nice. Not sure what that little delay was about. This is locally stored, actually.
One evening as the sun went down.
So as of right now, the iPad mini still wins for responsiveness and speed when you're just navigating the UI and launching apps, navigating around inside the applications. As I said though, when there's an update to 4.2 that fixes a little bit of that lag and some of that crashiness that got introduced, occasional crashes, not all the time crashes, I'm sure we'll be looking at something that's a lot more comparable once again to the iPad mini. How about battery life? 7-inch class tablets tend to have pretty good battery life. After all, they're not driving really huge screens, and both of these do quite well. I average about 8 to 8.5 hours on my Nexus 7. That's with the brightness set at about 50%. Brightness set likewise on the iPad mini, I'm getting about 10.5 hours. So you're going to get a little bit longer battery life out of the iPad mini as well. That's one of the benefits of actually having a dual versus quad-core CPU, apparently. And for those of you who have children, who have families you may not want to share all your content with, Google has introduced users. If we take a look here, we've got a new entry. So we can create new users if we want and give them access to various content or not. The iPad mini is still, no, single user device, and that's always been a drawback if you want to share this amongst family members. Now when it comes to gaming, both of these are actually very capable devices, and I've enjoyed hours of gaming on both of them. I slightly like the bigger display on the iPad mini, a little bit bigger and immersive, but not as unwieldy as 10-inch tablets, especially if you're using accelerometer-based games like racing games where, well, it's flailing around the 10-inch tablet just feels like it's inviting disaster. But performance and game selection, application selection in general, that's another iOS win. There's a whole lot more tablet-optimized applications available for iOS and a lot of top-tier games. And though you're looking at something that has the iPad 2 brains in there, it's not a painful experience because developers are still developing for all the iPad 1 and iPad 2 and now iPad minis out there, so not everything requires the greater horsepower that you find in the iPad with Retina display. With the Nexus you get the Tegra 3, and that means you can play Tegra Zone optimized games, get extra effects, visual effects, particularly water and reflections and things like that. And I've had to play just about every game I've thrown at it flawlessly, including demanding games like Batman, or again, all the Tegra Zone games. I have played them all, and this really enjoyed it quite a bit. Game selection though, obviously it's not going to be what it is on iOS. That said, yes, you can run phone optimized games on 7-inch tablet, and since it is a 7-inch tablet, it doesn't look as bad as it does when you stretch those out to 10 inches, so that does widen the library of titles that you can actually make use of. Now with both of these you get mapping solutions. You get Google Maps on the Nexus 7. Everybody loves Google Maps. Don't have to explain to you about Google Maps, do I? You know it's great stuff. And there's a GPS built inside. Now with the iPad mini, if you get the Wi-Fi version, it's going to use Wi-Fi triangulation for location. And that's fine in urban and suburban areas because there's a lot of Wi-Fi access points to provide data for location, and you would think there's a GPS in there. It actually does such a good job of location. But once you get to more rural areas, so you're driving on interstates, well, you're out of luck there. So you're going to have to get the LTE model if you want the actual GPS in the iPad mini. So chalk one up for the $199 Nexus 7 there. Also, well, I won't make too much fun of Apple Maps. We know they're working hard to improve it, but Apple Maps just not up to snuff with Google Maps yet. We haven't had any problems with directions being faulty or incorrect, or with misplaced landmarks. I know some folks in very dense urban locations like New York City have seen some quackiness going on. So far it's worked for us, but visually speaking, there is still the funny thing of some landmarks being flattened, some highways looking like they're going under the river instead of over the river. Yeah. So if I was getting something that I really cared about for navigation, I would get myself the Nexus 7 and probably the 3G version so that you have access to map data. You can download map data separately if you need to do that, though, or use the hotspot in your mobile phone or a MiFi if you don't want to get the 3G version. In terms of PIM applications, that means contacts, calendars, stuff like that, you get that on both devices. Both of these can sync to Exchange. They can both sync to Google for Google Calendar, Google Contacts, Gmail. You don't get True Push Gmail, however, on the iPad mini, so it's going to check on a schedule there. So if you rely on instantaneous notification of your new emails, again, a Google product is going to make more sense for you there. They both have capable video players. If you're going with the Nexus 7 for the homebrew provider, shall we say, you're looking at Google Play Store, which is a pretty healthy store. Google has ramped it up quickly. So you have Google Play Books, Google Play Music, Google Play Videos. And obviously with the iPad mini, you've got iTunes and that whole ecosystem of content. Both of these can play 1080p video just fine. Neither of these actually has a 1080p screen. So with the iPad mini, you can either get the Lightning to HDMI adapter if you want to plug that into your TV, or otherwise use AirPlay if you happen to own an Apple TV to stream. With the Nexus 7, we have, well, you can download DLNA clients, and some of them are a little challenging to set up, but there it is. You can do that and stream with DLNA, which is a fairly open standard. This does not support MHL out over the little micro USB connector at the bottom, so there is no HDMI cable option there. Now, before we got the 4.2 update, we had USB host if you wanted to root this device, and since a lot of people who buy Google Nexus devices are enthusiasts, they're into rooting, they're into loading custom ROMs, you could actually get USB host going loaded driver, and Google changed the whole model for USB subsystem in 4.2, so we have not been able to get our USB flash drives and things working. Obviously, USB host is not a feature with the iPad mini. The best you're going to get is a camera connection kit kind of thing to look at SD card content. When it comes to wireless, you get single band Wi-Fi on the Nexus 7, and that's why you don't get Miracast. That's another feature that was introduced in Android OS 4.2 that gives you wireless streaming, a lot like Intel WiDi. In fact, Intel WiDi is going to get certified for Miracast, which is going to be the standard for the Wi-Fi Alliance for streaming stuff to your home theater equipment. But you need dual band Wi-Fi, only single band here. The iPad, you have dual band Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN, good throughput on that. Stronger Wi-Fi, by the way, than I get on the Nexus 7 in terms of how far I can go from the access point while still maintaining a pretty good, viable, and fast connection. Both of these guys have Bluetooth. Both of them support HID devices, which means keyboards and mice. And they also support headsets, stereo headphones, things like that, stereo speakers. And last but not least, we're just going to cover who these devices are for. Obviously, the Nexus 7 is for anybody on a budget, honestly. At $199 for a pretty solid tablet, well, there you are. Beyond that, the Nexus line of devices has always been there for enthusiasts. That means people who like to root their device, people who like to install custom ROMs, and that speaks to the overall difference in customizability. For the Android, you get the customizable desktop that so many people love. You get widgets. Of course, we just have a bunch of shortcut icons up here in the main screen, and we have our Google search, which includes voice search. You get Siri on the iPad mini. You get Google voice search with Google now, which actually does a fairly good job of some natural language query type searches. Not quite up to Siri there for fanciness of imitating artificial intelligence, but still very good and actually quite useful. And here we go. We've got our little weather bug widget right here. A little bit hard to see, but we can float that guy around, put it where we want. Maybe even some of these are resizable as well. And then we've got things like our Google Play widget here. It shows me my latest content. You can have all sorts of useful things. You can have Evernote up here. You can have your inbox widget, all that stuff. And with iOS, what do you get? well, you get your grid of icons. That's what you get. You do get the notification center up top, tells you about anything that's going on. And with this, we have a two-part. We have a notification area here. I've got my weather from Google Now showing up there, and anything else that I need to know about would appear there. And if you swipe on this side, we get quick access to settings. Now that's something I like. It drives me crazy with the iPad mini. I always have to back out of whatever I'm doing and launch settings if I just want to change something like my brightness. Here we've got some quick access to things finally with Android 4.2. I can get here to my brightness, to my all settings, Bluetooth on, Bluetooth off, Wi-Fi, that kind of stuff. So actually I like that quite a bit. So I would say Nexus 7, excellent for tinkerers and those who like to customize. The iPad mini, as always, iPad for folks who just want something that's really quick, reliable, and very good at consuming media of all kinds and viewing web content. So that's our comparison smackdown of the iPad mini and the Google Nexus 7, both available now. And as ever, it's really about, first off, which software platform you like better. Do you like Android or do you like iOS? And secondly, in this case, it's about price, because the Google Nexus 7 is incredibly affordable versus the iPad mini at $329. You're looking at $199 price of entry here. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full review of both of these products, watch our video reviews, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.